Hi there, Chris here. Today's video, I want to talk about nostalgia and how it pertains to wargaming and basically the environment and the culture that we're in now. Nostalgia is running rampant, and it even is, inside the wargaming world. I see like on Facebook and other social media, groups like Old Hammer. A lot of fun part of it. It's great. Reliving those old sculptures, even applying new paint jobs to those older sculpts, and doing something different. But and of course, a lot of people out there are collectors and everything like that. So nostalgia runs really deep, especially for a lot of older war gamers like myself. I got into this hobby way back when. Around 88, I got into this hobby. My cousins were playing Warhammer 40,000 Rogue Trader, and I was like, ooh, what is that? That's really cool. And I was just, what was I, about 13 at the time, and 12, 13 around then. And I was like, whoa, what's all this? And of course they kept kicking me out because they were too cool for me. And so, I equated it to, wow, this is what the cool kids are doing. And so I wanted to get in on that. As I slowly figured out stuff and, I started getting into the hobby. And of course, I was already building models and such at the time. I was into Star Trek. I was building the spaceships and, all those kinds of things. It was a really great time as far as my youth was concerned because, a lot of times the wargaming kind of kept me out of trouble, so I look fondly back on those days. When I was getting into this hobby. And, sometimes when you're working on a model and the smell of the paint catches you and you're like, oh, and it takes you back. Or you listen to a song while you're painting a model and it takes you back to a moment when you were really young. It can be anybody's age. I'm not, this isn't just for all of us old fogies out there. I'm talking about just about everybody out there. And nostalgia seems to be part of the culture as far as everything we see out there, as far as, advertisements and movies and nostalgia is everywhere, and it seems to be a marketable thing to draw on as far as selling something to somebody. It's just kind of interesting. But in the spirit of the subject, I was recently with Ash a few weeks back, or maybe it was a month ago. He had busted out the old Citadel annuals, which were these thick magazines that were just basically a catalog of every model that Games Workshop produced. Really, really fantastic. If you can find one, online or even just reprints or what have you, if you can find one of those online, I would recommend picking them up just for historical sake. Even if you got into this hobby, in the last couple of years, it's still worth checking out some of those things to see where wargaming was, 20, 30 years ago. And it's a lot of fun, and nostalgia is not a bad thing. It's not necessarily a great thing either, but he had busted out the annual and I was like, wow, this is really fantastic. And I was looking through and I was like, oh, this is so fantastic. And of course, he had done a video where he was talking about an old white dwarf, and that got me thinking, damn it. All right. I usually equate issue 133, where I basically started buying white dwarves. Usually equate this white dwarf to the first white dwarf I purchased. When it came out, I believe it was like 91. So this is issue 133. 133? Yeah, 133. It came out in January of 1991. And I have all my white dwarfs that I've had. I was never a subscriber very often. I would buy it for a year or two and then stop. Usually when I took a break from the hobby, and then I would come back in, and so my collection of white dwarfs. I have a stack like this. I probably should have had that in the video, this whole stack of white dwarfs. But I still have a lot of these old white dwarfs, and this is not in great condition. I was not buying these at the time for with the intention of collecting them or anything like that. I was buying them because they were a source of information. Way back when I was in this hobby, this was the only way, like these kind of articles and stuff like that, where I could get the tips and and learn about miniature painting. And where I was at the time, I did not have easy access to conventions or anything like that. And I was a little kid. I didn't have a lot of money. Yeah, this is always a really fun treat, with all the old pictures here, and it has all the credits, table of contents. used to show all the list of stores, and you get the articles and the old rules. This one here has the orc mechanics rule, where they were playing with like different rules for the, obviously for the orc mechanics. And I believe this one also has the rules. It has all these cards that you could photocopy and print out, and advertisements for the old painting sets. Of course, it had the shock attack gun rules, and it always had like these wonderful images in these white dwarves. It's just, of course, it's all nostalgia right now, but it takes me way back. And I used to love these rules. Of course, like Space Hulk, and that's really what got me into this hobby, was Space Hulk. When I saw the box art, and I'll probably post an image in this video of that box art. And I recently purchased a print from a company who's been producing prints of the artwork from Games Workshop, and I picked up a print from them, and I got it hanging on my wall. It's on the other wall over here. I'm not going to show you, but anyway, these magazines were just everything to me back in the day. All sorts of rules. The magazine, a lot of opinion during probably around the late 90s, when the magazine really kind of changed and stopped being kind of informative, and it was more or less just like kind of long commercials and everything like that, as far as like trying to sell models and stuff like that. And but they used to have like really great articles like on making terrain. That's a great one. I think that was one of the reasons why I picked this magazine up, because it had the Space Hulk scenario in there. It also had terrain building guide in here as well, and I was like, oh wow, this is really fantastic. And then I believe there's also a guide in here, and White Dwarf used to be just really fantastic. Yes, you often had near the back here, you had these heavy metal sections where they talk about how they went about a particular paint job, and it was the Chaos Knights in the picture here, how they went about the pastel type of color scheme for them. And again, these were just like, I thumbed through these magazines so many times. I still have a huge pile of them in my collection, and sometimes I debate whether or not I want to get rid of them, because they just kind of take up space. And I've purged many times in my wargaming lifetime of getting rid of boxes of models and stuff I was never going to get to, and paints and whatever. And I've purged a few times. I don't really look back and think, oh wow, I really wish I had them, because I don't, because I would have nowhere to store it. I would just be up to my eyeballs in stuff. And anybody who's been listening to me for any length of time knows that I'm not really that hoardy. I'm not a hoarder. So issue 133 of White Dwarf. That's the first White Dwarf I bought. I purchased White Dwarfs before that and after, of course, and I would go back and I would look for some issue 136. I believe it's 136 has the Baneblade guide for making your own Baneblade. These kinds of things, it's often these kind of things that old wargamers like us, were nostalgic about, is when there was more of this hands-on kind of approach to wargaming, and everything wasn't laid out for you. Now it's kind of, here's the terrain, here's your models, here's your rules, go. Whereas before it was, here's like a guide, and here's what we use to make our own tables. Maybe you can do something. And there was a lot more, I don't want to say a lot more creativity, but there was a lot more ingenuity in those days. At least that's how it feels to me, especially when I'm seeing all these images of people's work on social media and stuff. And it's just, it's not disheartening or anything like that. It's just the sign of the times we're in. And so, we're often relying on this nostalgia, especially for, reprints of models and resculpts. Like, for example, the old Noise Marine getting a resculpt, and now he's in plastic, and he's, got a much more dynamic pose. But that's playing off that nostalgia. I bought that model at Warhammer World, and because I really wanted it, and, nostalgia. And so nostalgia is a very, very powerful thing, and it's, it can motivate us to do all sorts of things, especially when, we get together with our old gaming group and our old buddies, and back in our college days or high school days or whatever. And it's a funny thing. And sometimes I get the feeling it's being used to exploit us as consumers and hobbyists. And I don't know, maybe that's just me being a grumpy old man. I don't know, but yeah. So I don't know where I was really going with this video, other than I wasn't really trying to pose it as a question of, is nostalgia bad or is nostalgia good? It's really kind of up to you guys, I guess, to decide whether or not, you know, are we being exploited, or is it just everybody's combined shared love of the rich past? These different days. There was no internet. I know some of you guys are out there like, no internet. Like when the pyramids were built. So hopefully you enjoyed this, whatever this was. A look back, I guess. It's a look back. It's being a bit nostalgic and a look back. Let me know if you guys want me to do any more look-throughs as far as old white dwarfs. I have a whole bunch. I probably might talk about one of my favorite white dwarfs that had one of the most awesome articles that was just inspired me. Maybe I'll talk about that one sometime. Let me know down below if you guys like these kinds of videos. If you guys want me to do more of these kinds of videos, and maybe continue my journey through old white dwarfs and reminiscing of days gone by. So thank you for watching. Huge thank you to all my patrons. Without your support, these videos would not be possible. If you're considering Patreon support, click the link in the description below. There are varying tiers in which to support at, and a huge thank you. And of course, if you're not able to support monetarily, clicking the thumbs up, liking, subscribing, sharing the video, all those things help as well. And so a huge thank you to everybody. It's been a really fun journey so far. And so hopefully with your support, I will be able to continue this kind of work and, you know, continue to hopefully inspire, educate, and inform, and possibly, maybe, even entertain. Take care of those brushes, and they will take care of you, and I will see you guys in the next video.